everybody. I hope that you have had a great week or are having a great week. I'm going to sing a song over you today, and I just want you to relax in it. It's beautiful, so I hope you receive it. Here I am, down on my knees again, surrendering all, surrendering all. Find me here, Lord, as you draw me near. I'm desperate for you. I'm desperate for you. I surrender. I surrender. I want to know you more. I want to know you more. I surrender. I surrender. I want to know you more. I want to know you more. Drench my soul as mercy and grace unfold. I hunger and thirst. I hunger and thirst. With arms stretched wide, I know you hear my cry. Speak to me now. I want to know you more. I want to know you more. I surrender. I surrender. I want to know you more. I want to know you more.
A few years ago, I started a new job in a government organisation. Awkwardly, a couple of days into the new job, the leader gave me quite the introduction to my new colleagues, and he set the bar really high in terms of expectations about the kind of person I was and the expertise that I brought to the role. But it was a massive transition for me. And while I'd worked alongside government in my area of expertise, I'd never worked in government, so it was a really steep learning curve. Just a couple of days ago, I was farewelling a colleague who'd started the same day as me, and we laughed as we recalled these days of information overload. But at the time, in those first few days, if I'm really honest, I wasn't laughing. I was wondering what the heck I'd done, and I clearly remember sitting at my desk a couple of days into my new job. I'd followed this convoluted set of instructions to create a super copy of my timesheet to save into a new kind of electronic file management system that I'd never worked with before, and I never found the document again. And here I was, built up to be some amazing recruit to the organisation, and I couldn't even find a document that I'd just saved. I remember sitting at my desk in this freaked out silence with a "what was I thinking taking this job" narrative running through my head, all the while hoping that no one was noticing my incompetence. And I sat there trying to assess which of my new colleagues I should interrupt and ask such a stupid question to. Vulnerability. That's what I was experiencing and feeling. That sense of being at risk or of being exposed, open to criticism or attack or hurt. We've all felt it, we've experienced it. It's common to being human, to living in connection to other people. Dr. Brené Brown, she's a social work professor who spent the last 20 years studying vulnerability, shame, empathy and courage. And in her book, Daring Greatly, she describes a few different examples of vulnerability. She says that asking for help can be one, standing up for yourself, calling a friend whose loved one's just died, the first date after a divorce, falling in love, or getting pregnant after miscarriages, exercising in public when you're out of shape and don't know what to do, being accountable or admitting you're afraid. You've probably got your own examples that come to your mind where you felt vulnerable, either in the past or more recently. The last couple of years, Jesus has been inviting me deeper into a journey of understanding where vulnerability can actually strengthen my relationship with him and others. While there's more talk about vulnerability these days, it's still such a countercultural position to take to embrace vulnerability. We live in a world where it's still about taking a fake it until you make it approach and not allowing people to see your weaknesses. But friends, that's not the way of the kingdom. We have an upside down kingdom. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says that his power is made perfect in weakness. And what we know about our God is that he is wholly relational, and he desires intimacy with us more than anything else. And there's no intimacy without vulnerability. A couple of weeks ago, as I read the passage of scripture that just came up on the screen, I saw it through a lens that I'd not fully appreciated before. Typically, when the story of this encounter between the woman and Jesus is told, the focus is on the extravagant offering of love and worship that she freely pours upon Jesus. And it is extraordinary, it's beautiful. The other lens that's typically preached is the revelation that Jesus brings, that those who have a lot to be forgiven of are aware of the incredible grace and forgiveness that they've received. And because of that, they tend to love Jesus with a greater level of extravagance and abandon than those who assume that they don't have very much to be forgiven for. Yet when I read it just recently, it dawned on me that without this woman's incredible choice to engage in the midst of vulnerability, this encounter wouldn't have taken place at all. So let's just take a moment to have a look at that and unpack that. Have a look at verses 37 and verse 38. In the neighbourhood, there was an immoral woman of the streets, known to all to be a prostitute. When she heard about Jesus being at Simon's house, she took an exquisite flask made from alabaster, filled it with the most expensive perfume, went right into the home of the Jewish religious leader and knelt at the feet of Jesus in front of all the guests. Broken and weeping, she covered his feet with the tears that fell from her face. She kept crying and drying his feet with her long hair. Over and over, she kissed Jesus' feet. Then she opened her flask and anointed his feet with a costly perfume as an act of worship. When this happened, it wasn't obviously 2021. This wasn't an era where women had the same standing as men, and technically it was still punishable by death for anyone to commit adultery. While the Romans had prevented the Jewish religious leaders from following through on that punishment as often as they wanted to, it was still out there. So for this woman to be known as a prostitute, she can't have been living an easy life. Imagine being her. A woman whose reputation preceded her. Everyone knew who she was, what she did. You can imagine the turning heads as she'd walk down the street, the whispers, the sideways glances. She wasn't acceptable. In contrast, the Jewish religious leaders were held in really high regard in the community. Local dignitaries, almost elitism if you like, in their social standing. They held the power, and Jesus was Simon's guest, a guest in his home. Before this encounter, we know that Jesus had been performing miracles of healing and setting people free from torment. The religious people were struggling with some of these things and who Jesus was claiming to be, but those who recognised their need of grace saw Jesus for who he really was, and they were being transformed by him. I can only imagine that somehow word had made its way to this woman, that there was a man named Jesus, and that no matter what was going on in your world, he had the power to set you free, that he truly is the Son of God, and he'll accept you just as you are. Can you imagine the dilemma this must have presented? To know where Jesus is, to know what he can do for you, but to have to expose yourself so openly and publicly to be at his feet. Brené Brown's definition of vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. But she doesn't stop the definition there. She goes on to say, but vulnerability is not weakness. It's our most accurate measure of courage. What courage it took for that woman to consider putting herself out there to pursue Jesus. What courage it took in the face of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure to pursue hope of something greater than what she knew. what courage it took to pursue freedom, even if it meant walking in vulnerability to get there. A little further on in a book, Daring Greatly, Brené Brown says, vulnerability is not weakness, and the uncertainty, risk and emotional exposure we face every day are not optional. Our only choice is a question of engagement. Our willingness to own and engage with our vulnerability determines the depth of our courage, and the level to which we protect ourselves from being vulnerable is a measure of our fear and disconnection. The truth is, the woman did have a choice that day. She could have listened to the narrative that fear was speaking to her in her vulnerability. And you can imagine fear's stories over her. You can't go over there. What if they choose to make an example of you? How are you even going to get to Jesus? It's not like they're going to let someone like you sit down with him. It's pointless. Have you completely lost your mind? You just need to stay here in the shadows where you belong. Hope isn't for people like you. The kind of narratives we've all heard about different things in our lives. If she'd chosen to listen to those stories, she could have protected herself from that vulnerability, where her heart didn't beat so fast and her stomach didn't churn so hard. She would have protected herself from the prying, judging eyes piercing her back as she sat there on the floor sobbing under Jesus' feet. But the price of that protection would have been disconnection from that encounter with Jesus. She would have been robbed of the opportunity to sit at the feet of her rescuer, where her heart was raw before him as she offered him the overflow of her heart through her tears. By owning and engaging with her vulnerability and courage, this woman encountered intimacy with Jesus. She sat in an embodied presence of acceptance and grace and forgiveness and restoration. And she experienced all of that publicly. The truth is, that act of vulnerability wasn't without the prying eyes and the judgmental thoughts of others towards her. Jesus could sense what the religious leader Simon was thinking, and he addressed it. And the beautiful thing in that moment is that it wasn't through the religious leader that Jesus revealed himself and the extravagance of his kingdom, but it was through the woman. It was through the prostitute. If anything, Jesus was telling the people, don't be religious. Be like this woman. She gets it. She's the one who knows how to love me right. And right there in the presence of everyone, Jesus declares her to be forgiven. Kurt Thompson is a psychiatrist and a Christian author, and he says that vulnerability is not just a random state of neediness or openness to danger. It's built into the cosmic fabric of the world to provide the opportunity for discovery and creation, and for the emergence of beauty and goodness. Vulnerability embraced opened the door for a beautiful new beginning for this woman in living fully alive and forgiven. We don't know the end of her story. Throughout history, some have pondered who she might have been, but even then we don't know how life went for her as she took up Jesus' invitation to go and walk in the ways of peace. But what a world of discovery that would have been there for her, to discover the beauty and goodness that Jesus had written all over her life, one courageous, vulnerable step after the other. When we reflect upon these encounters in Scripture, there's always the opportunity to see the invitation that Jesus is extending to us. And I believe his invitation to us today is to choose to redefine our relationship with vulnerability, to shift from seeing vulnerability as weakness and instead see it as most accurate measure of courage, to embrace it as the pathway to greater intimacy with Jesus and to others. If we accept that vulnerability is essential to intimacy, then there's an opportunity to surrender some of the stories that have kept us from vulnerability, to choose to lay down the world's fake it till you make it approach to life, to choose to lay down the masks that glorify strength and independence and having it together in preference of being authentic and being known. Sometimes we picked up those masks out of broken or wounded places, and maybe they're supported by loud and strong narratives of fear or survival. Maybe it hasn't felt safe to be seen or to be known. And sadly, sometimes those wounds have even come through the religious people we've known who've told us we don't measure up or we don't belong. Being courageous and engaging vulnerably doesn't mean that we suddenly throw caution to the wind and wisdom out the window and share everything with everyone. Brené Brown puts it this way: you share with people who've earned the right to hear your story. While it's important to find community to journey life with, you always have Jesus desiring to walk intimately with you through life. And what I love about the Gospels is that Jesus repeatedly meets people where they are and he embraces them just as they are. His focus is on connection with them, much as is seen in this encounter with the woman. The religious guy saw a woman who didn't belong. Jesus saw a woman he loved in need of grace, who was loving him beautifully. Maybe the most courageous act of vulnerability you can embrace today is to take a step towards Jesus just as you are, despite what everybody says about you. Let me encourage you, there's no safer place in the world than at his feet or in his arms. His embrace is healing and life-giving. So in the next few minutes, we're just going to create a space where you can allow him to speak to your heart, to feel that pull of vulnerability, and to dare to enter into it courageously.
surrender.